In the spring of 1943, Hamburg's air still trembled with the memory of sirens. The ruins smoked quietly, and what once had been the sound of trams now came as the hollow clatter of boots on broken streets. Mothers patched windows with cardboard. Fathers, if they returned at all, stood too long staring at the ground, and the children, thin, restless, half-orphaned by fire, played in the rubble like small ghosts. They learned to listen for the hum of planes, to tell the difference between friend and foe by the rhythm of an engine. They scavenged metal, whispered secret codes, carried messages they did not understand. War had turned them into errand boys of shadows. By late July, when the city burned for 7 nights and 7 days, the world ended more than once. Some children vanished in the smoke, others followed soldiers retreating through the Elbe's haze, their small faces painted with soot and courage. They were called spies, by men too afraid to see what they were, only children who had learned the wrong kind of bravery. This letter comes from one who stayed behind, from a teacher who counted the faces in her class until the numbers no longer matched the names. She writes not to accuse, but to remember, the smallest voices, the ones who disappeared between the bombs and the accusations. And so, dear reader, when the world demands silence in the name of survival, what becomes of the children who speak too soon or too bravely? My name was once Fräulein Adler, though I do not think anyone alive now would remember it. I taught at the Mönckebergstrasse primary school before the firestorm. My pupils were children of dock workers, clerks, widows and soldiers, boys who drew tanks in the margins of their notebooks, and girls who stitched doll clothes from blackout fabric. By 1943, our classroom smelled of damp plaster and coal smoke. The walls were cracked, and we wrote on scraps of paper torn from ration forms. Still, they came every morning, eager and hungry for something more than fear. Among them were 3 who will not be found in any archive: Otto, whose father had gone missing at Stalingrad; Clara, who could recite poems by Heine even as bombs fell; and Jonas, smallest of all, who carried messages for the local defense unit, thinking himself a soldier. When the retreat began, they followed the wrong column of men. That is how I last saw them. Dust on their faces, their school satchels still on their backs, running toward a future they could not read. It was a Wednesday, cold and grey, the kind of morning when the sky itself seemed to carry ash. I remember how the chalk felt against the blackboard, leaving faint white trails as I wrote the date, April 14th, 1943. The children copied it carefully, their pencils dull, their letters uncertain. Jonas arrived late, breathless and flushed from running. His shoes were worn thin, his coat missing buttons. "Fräulein," he said, holding out a folded scrap of paper. "A message?" His eyes shone as if he'd brought treasure. I took it, saw that it was blank. He laughed softly. "I can't let you read it. It's for the men by the canal." There was pride in his voice, the kind that comes from being trusted by grown men. I told him to sit, though my hands trembled slightly. Otto leaned over and whispered something to him, and both boys grinned. Even Clara, quiet and watchful, smiled at their secret. That morning I tried to teach them about metaphors, though what could one say about symbols when the world outside was already one? Each image, fire, night, storm, had become too literal. When the distant thud of bombs sounded, no one even looked up. We had learned not to flinch. At noon, the sirens wailed again. I told them to go home quickly, to stay near the shelters. Otto asked if he could help the men by the south gate. Clara said she wanted to bring water to the wounded. They spoke as if courage were a duty written into their lessons. Before they left, I read to them from Goethe's Der Erlkönig. They loved the rhythm, the horse galloping through darkness, the father clutching his child. When I finished, the room was silent. Jonas asked, "Fräulein, does the father save him in the end?" I hesitated. "He tries," I said, "but the forest is dark." They nodded, as if that answer made sense. After they left, I stayed behind to clean the chalk from the boards. The room smelled faintly of smoke and damp wool. Their desks were scattered with pencil shavings and crumbs from their rations. On Clara's seat, I found a scrap of paper torn from a notebook. She had written a single line in her careful script. Wir müssen helfen, sonst sind wir keine Kinder mehr. We must help, or we are no longer children. That night, the sky turned red again. I could hear the drone of planes, the thunder of bombs, the church bells clanging uselessly. I pressed my ear to the window and thought of their small faces, their determination. I told myself they were safe, huddled in a shelter somewhere, waiting for dawn. But by morning, their seats were empty. Their names were called, but no one answered. 2 days passed before anyone spoke their names aloud. In the chaos after the air raids, children went missing often, sent to relatives, evacuated by rail, or buried under rubble too deep to reach. But something in my chest told me these 3 had not been lost that way. Their absence felt deliberate, like a pause too long between breaths. On the 3rd morning, I left the school. The headmaster had stopped keeping attendance. There were too few to count. The city was unrecognizable, streets blistered, glass reduced to powder. Charred bicycles lay half buried in ash. I wrapped a scarf over my mouth and began walking south, toward the canals where the last of the soldiers had retreated. The road was lined with people, families pushing carts, old men clutching photographs, women searching for water. Every face carried the same dull disbelief. The air smelled of burnt wood and something metallic. I asked after the children, showing their names written on a torn page from my roll book. No one remembered them at first. Then a man in a tattered uniform, his left arm in a sling, said, "Yes, 3 of them. They followed the column toward Hamburg. The little one carried a satchel, thought he was a messenger." I thanked him, though the words caught in my throat. Following a retreat meant walking into confusion. Soldiers, refugees, wounded men, all mixed together, shadows of an army that no longer knew which way was home. Still, I went on. By dusk, I reached the southern gate. The brick arch had been shattered by shell fire, the air thick with smoke from burning fuel. Among the wreckage lay scattered papers, tin cups, a half-eaten loaf of bread. And there, by the roadside, was something small and heartbreakingly ordinary. A child's satchel scorched at the edges, the initials JK stitched in faded red thread. Jonas's. Inside were a crumpled drawing of a plane, a bit of chalk, and a button shaped like a star. The same one he used to brag about in class, saying it came from his father's uniform. I held it in my hands until the ash stained my gloves. That night I took shelter in a half-collapsed warehouse. The air was cold, the river whispering nearby. I could not sleep. Outside, the soldiers' voices drifted through the dark. Orders, curses, prayers. Then another sound, the low, sharp bark of a command, followed by something that silenced them all. I told myself it was nothing. A warning shot, perhaps. But the air felt wrong, as if the night itself were holding its breath. At dawn, I found a local woman gathering firewood by the embankment. She looked at me, then at the satchel I carried. "You're looking for the children," she said softly. "I saw them yesterday. They came with the men, helping carry messages. Someone accused them of spying, said they were signaling to the British planes with mirrors." She lowered her eyes. They didn't understand. They were just playing. I could not speak. I followed where she pointed, to a patch of muddy earth near the river, where 3 small shapes had been hurriedly covered with sand and debris. No markers, no names, only silence. The soldiers had already gone. The city was surrendering itself to emptiness. I knelt there, pressing my palms into the cold ground until I could no longer feel my fingers. When I rose, I could not tell whether the world had grown quiet or whether I had simply stopped hearing it. When I returned to Hamburg, the city seemed older, as if it had aged in my absence. The streets were grey with dust, the trees stripped bare, the canals swollen with wreckage. The bells of St. Nikolai no longer rang, only the crows kept watch above the ruins. I went back to the school, though I knew it would not be the same. The building still stood, but barely. The roof had caved in above the west wing, and the smell of damp ash clung to everything. I swept the floors, cleared the broken glass, and straightened the few desks that could still stand. There was no one left to teach, but I did it anyway. It felt like an act of faith, fragile, foolish, necessary. I kept their names on the roll call. Each morning, I said them softly to the empty room. Otto, Clara, Jonas. I would pause after each, listening, as though the air might one day answer back. Some days, I found small things left behind in the debris. Otto's penknife, rusted but intact. One of Clara's ribbons, singed at the edge. A marble that might have belonged to Jonas. I placed them in a box I kept on the teacher's desk, beside a candle stub. At dusk, I would light it, letting the flame tremble against the cracked walls. It was not a shrine exactly. It was a way of saying they had existed, that they were not ghosts, but children who once recited poems and shared bread and laughed at the wrong moments. In August, the occupying soldiers arrived. They ordered all remaining civilians to leave the school. I gathered what I could, the roll book, the box, the candle, and carried them to the cellar of my sister's home on the outskirts. When I told her about the children, she pressed her hand to her mouth and whispered, "You cannot speak of it. Not now. Not yet." But silence was already everywhere. The war had turned words into dangerous things. Still, I wrote their names each night in a small journal, along with fragments of what I remembered. Otto's lopsided grin, Clara's shy recitations, Jonas's stubborn pride. I wrote until the ink ran out, then carved their initials into the wooden wall with the tip of a broken pencil. Sometimes I thought I heard them again, in the whistle of the wind through shattered glass, in the laughter of children passing by the ruins. Once, as I crossed Münkebergstrasse at dusk, I saw a boy in a cap too large for his head dart across the road carrying a satchel. My heart stopped. I called out, "Jonas!" The boy turned, startled, and for a heartbeat, the world reversed. But it was not him, just another child born into the silence they had left behind. That night, I returned to the riverbank where they had been found. The moonlight turned the mud silver. I brought 3 stones from the schoolyard, one for each of them, and laid them where the sand was still uneven. I whispered their names again, not as a teacher calling roll, but as a prayer. The city was rebuilding by then. New walls rose from old foundations, and people spoke of beginnings, of peace. But I could not stop hearing the echo, the soft hum of children's voices caught between laughter and fear. They had tried to be brave, and the world had mistaken that bravery for treason. Sometimes I still ask myself what lesson I failed to teach them. That courage and innocence are not the same thing, that silence can be as deadly as a gun. Perhaps there was no lesson at all, only a truth too heavy for small hands to carry. The war ended, not with triumph, but with exhaustion. When the foreign soldiers came, people greeted them with silence. The city had no voice left, only smoke curling from the broken chimneys, only faces that no longer lifted toward the sun. I stayed. I could not leave the ruins where so many names had been erased. My sister begged me to go south, to the countryside where the air was clean and the fields still held color. But every time I packed my things, I found myself drawn back to Münkebergstrasse, to the ghost of my classroom. By then, the school was a hollow shell. The walls were scarred with bullet holes. Ivy crept in through the shattered windows. I swept the floors one last time and gathered what remained of my students' things. Scraps of handwriting, a few drawings, the marble, the ribbon, the penknife. I placed them in a wooden box wrapped in linen. Inside, I added a letter addressed to the ones who will never be old. I buried that box beneath the elm tree in the courtyard, the same tree that once shaded the children's games. I thought of how they had played there, jumping rope, tossing their caps into the branches, their laughter chasing the pigeons away. It seemed impossible that those sounds could ever fade completely. For years after, I returned each spring to the elm, even when the new school was built beside it. I would stand there while the younger children ran across the yard, their voices bright and careless, and I would whisper the names of the 3 who could not join them. Sometimes I imagined they were there too, sitting in the shade, listening to the world they never had the chance to grow into. One morning in 1951, a boy stopped his play and came up to me. "Fräulein," he said, though I was long past that title. "Why do you always talk to the tree?" I smiled. "Because it remembers." He laughed and ran off as he should have, but later I saw him come back with a small paper airplane which he tossed gently toward the branches. It caught the wind and fluttered down beside the roots where the box lay hidden. I felt something in me ease, just a little. Time carried us all forward as it must. Streets were rebuilt, tram lines restored, windows replaced. People spoke less about the war and more about what came next. But every so often, a name would catch in my throat, and I would return to my journal, tracing the letters as though keeping them alive. In the 1960s, when the city planned to remove the old elm to widen the street, I went to the council meeting. I was an old woman by then, my voice thin but steady. I told them that beneath that tree rested the memory of children who had once carried messages and were mistaken for enemies. That the roots of that tree held more truth than any monument of stone could. They listened, and for reasons I still don't fully understand, they spared the elm. To this day it stands there, scarred but alive, its branches spreading over the schoolyard. Each year, the new students plant flowers beneath it, though they no longer know why. Sometimes if you stand there at dusk, when the light softens and the wind moves through the leaves, you can almost hear the faint laughter of children. And when I pass by, I do not cry anymore. I only whisper their names, and for a moment it feels as if the world still remembers them too. Dear reader, there are many kinds of silence in this world. The silence of fear, the silence of loss, and the silence we choose to keep the memory of love intact. I write this not to reopen wounds, but to keep 3 small names from vanishing beneath the dust of time. Otto, Clara, Jonas. They were not spies. They were not soldiers. They were children who believed in courage and who carried it too far into a world that could no longer tell innocence from defiance. If you ever walk through Hamburg and hear the wind through the old elm by the schoolyard, listen closely. You may hear them still, the quiet voices of those who wanted only to help echoing in the branches. Remember them, speak their names softly, keep them alive by listening. And if this story has reached you, dear reader, if it stirred even a whisper of memory in your heart, please like this story and subscribe to the channel so that the voices of the lost may continue to be heard.